Hey, Sean,
Yes, ma'am.
let's start out with everybody turning their cameras on and introducing themselves.
Okay. All right. I mean, you and I are in the presentation, but I'll turn my camera on here. My hair is probably a mess. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Sean Cross. I am a fish and wildlife biologist with the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society. I'm originally from Western Montana. I was born and raised on a Flathead Indian reservation. Spent all my youth there, graduated high school there and such, served in the Army, went to school at the University of Montana for my wildlife degree. I worked as a fish bio back home on Flathead and a fish bio for Nez Perce tribe. And then I went to work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a National Wildlife Refuge Manager from 2003 until last year. And my wife and I moved back home, and I started for the society this spring. Good, Corey?
Hi, everyone. You'll see my slide later, but I'm Corey Lucero. I'm with the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society. Sean and I are both the fish and wildlife biologists. I worked before for the society as the Southwest Chronic Wasting Disease biologist from 2003 to 2011. And I am glad to be back so that we can work to get you guys informed about everything that is out there. Let's see, let's go with Mitzi.
All right, Mitzi Reed. I'm the director of Choctaw Wildlife and Parks Department for Mississippi Band Choctaw Indians. So I wear several hats, and I think the longer y'all be with the society, y'all figure that out. I also serve as one of the Southeast regional directors for the board of the society.
Ashley.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I am Ashley Carlisle. I'm the education coordinator for the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society. And I recently started my professional career last December, just right after I graduated with my Master's of Science from Colorado State University. And it's nice to meet you all.
Shannon.
My name is Shannon Claremont. I'm a wildlife biologist with the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. I do a lot of aerial surveys. I do management with carnivores, or basically all animals that get into trouble. I've had a lot of jobs before this one, so I'm pretty well rounded, and I'm very interested in today's topic, so hopefully I can learn something new on it.
Great. Jordan?
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm Jordan Grotz, and I'm with the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I just started as an environmental technician a couple months ago. Yeah, it's nice to meet you.
Tim?
All right, my name is Tim Pauls. I work for the Mississippi Band Choctaw Indians as a game warden and dam tender. I don't know what else you need to know.
Richard?
Yeah, I'm Richard, Shoalwater Bay Indian tribe. They're south of Washington. And I'm just in their wildlife division.
Great. Mr. Cochise?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Wasey Cochise from the Mesquite Apache tribe. I work with Division Resource Management and Protection, and I'm a land conservationist. And nice to meet you all.
You too. Okay, Sean, get it.
Okay, I gotta get off mute. Okay, like we're saying, Corey and I are gonna go through this presentation on chronic wasting disease. This is kind of a not really a new topic for me, but something I haven't really researched into before, but it means quite a bit to me. I hunt a lot, and you know, of course, it's important for our fish and wildlife species out there. Real quick, for the folks who may not know, the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society, it's a nonprofit society, professional society that was established to basically assist tribes and tribal and natural resource departments with projects, research, professional development, law enforcement, conservation officer development, that sort of thing. In the early 80s, when tribes really started to expand their natural resource programs and assert more sovereign authorities and self-determination programs. Go ahead, Corey.
Like I said
Just,
before. Huh? Go ahead. Keep
Go ahead.
going.
No, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. Once again, this is Corey Lucero here. I'm a member of the Sac and Fox Nation of Oklahoma, a graduate of Oklahoma State University. My career started out in the U.S. Forest Service on the Coconino National Forest in Arizona. I worked as one of 4 biologists, actually, for the BIA Southern Pueblos Agency. And as I said before, I was the Southwest Chronic Wasting Disease biologist. I've been a field biologist with SWCA and did some environmental compliance work, mainly keeping construction people out of either historic or biologic or cultural sites. And that was with ICF International. And currently I am one of 2 fish and wildlife biologists with the society.
All right, like I said, I'm Sean Cross. Ran through all that stuff already. I'm also a grandpa, so that's cool. All right, so today, obviously, we're going to talk about what is chronic wasting disease, what it actually is, the history of it, and how it's spread across, well, not only North America now, but the world, with the current distribution, what it means for us as people, and precautions to take. Mostly this is aimed at hunting, but or just to tell your hunters or the folks that are big game consumers in your communities. And then at the very end, I have a couple other concerns that, well, they just are things that I have in my mind that I'm keeping track of outside of CWD, but is very closely related. So what is chronic wasting disease? CWD is a type of transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, or TSE. CWD is the type that affects cervids, the deer family, and it has been confirmed in that list of animals right there: the deer, elk, reindeer, Sitka deer, and moose. I did quite a bit of research on trying to see if there's any examples in caribou yet, and I couldn't find any. The Canadian government's done quite a bit of testing and hasn't turned any up. But now that it's infected reindeer in Norway, obviously I would assume that caribou are potentially susceptible to this disease. So what is a TSE, or transmissible spongiform encephalopathy disease? So TSEs are a group of progressive and always fatal conditions that affect our brain, or an animal's brain, and the nervous system. It includes humans, cattle, cervids, sheep, a whole list of mammals. In this, there's cats and there's another. We'll get to a slide in a minute. But if you look at that picture there on the bottom right, what it is it has a long incubation period in the body of the animal, in the brain, 12 to 18 months, like it says. It is a neuronal loss, and it's a failure to induce inflammation response, which is our body's natural response to any kind of infections, of any viral infections, whether it's a cold or anything else. And then the causative agent of a TSE are they're believed to be prions. And so that picture on the right, that picture on the right is a normal prion where it's curled like that, the green and the red. But a diseased prion it misfolds. So instead of being curled like the one on the left, they're those straight arrow, the green arrows, and it starts to cause damage in the brain. So the term prion refers to abnormal pathogenic agents that are transmissible and they cause that unusual and deadly folding in our cellular proteins in our brain. So the functions of the normal prions are not completely understood, like it says, but the abnormal folding you can see pretty easily that leads to brain damage and the characteristics and signs and symptoms of the diseases that are in this group. So that picture A is a normal brain with normal prion activity. And the one on the right, the B, you can see those white holes in the brain. That's caused from the misfolding of those prions, and it starts to, it starts to dissolve our brain like that. This is a tough topic, so it took me a number of days to get through this. So these are the various types of TSE diseases. The one that a lot of us are familiar with and we hear about quite a bit is mad cow disease, the bovine infection. There's the fatal, this one I had not heard of, fatal familial insomnia. Basically, it's the same sort of thing, but the person simply can't sleep, and eventually that leads to their loss of life. And then there's okay, here we go, Corey, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is caused by exposure, as in consumption or exposure to the brain and neurological stem cells of a cow that's contaminated with bovine spongiform, and that's in humans. We get it. And actually, and my wife and I know a couple of folks that passed away from this very disease that had eaten tainted bovine when they were in Korea. Then there's Kuru, which is consumption of the human brain. This is pretty much just, or was, contained within the cannibalistic cultures in the South Pacific. And then Scrapie, which I think most people have heard of, in sheep, and that spreads to, that's in all sheep. It gets in wild populations as well. Then there's chronic wasting disease, which we're talking about. This one I can't pronounce right. Gerstmann-Straussler-Schenker syndrome. The feline spongiform encephalopathy, transmissible mink, is pretty much contained to mink farms, but it does spread into the wild, but not as widespread as it gets in. Of course, the mink farms are all confined together. And then the ones just lumped here is exotic ungulate. So that's a lot of the stuff out of Africa and those kind of animals. So transmission. And then you can see by the picture, wildlife interact with domestic animals all the time. So it's likely spread between animals through fluids of some kind. It can be direct contact or indirectly through environmental contamination of the soil. An animal that has CWD dies, it rots right there. The stuff stays in the soil right in that area. And of course, it can be in food or water. It's spread through feces, especially early on in the contamination of the animal. And a lot of the research says that the prions remain in the environment for a very long time, many, many, many years. It is contagious within deer and elk populations. It spreads very quickly because animals interact the way they do. And like I said, it persists in the soil for quite a long time, 15 plus years. And this one is some fairly new research from 2018, but the researchers in Colorado have found that it binds to the roots and leaves of grasses, these contaminated prions, these CWD prions. The plant takes them up, an animal eats the plant, and they get the disease. So that's even more concerning than just direct contact between the animals. They're getting it from eating the actual vegetation where the stuff is at. I put this in parentheses to remind myself. I did try to look into fire. My first thought was, what does wildfire play on that or prescribed burns? And there's only one research project that I could find that's ongoing, and they haven't released their results yet on the effects of fire on the prions in the environment. Now, Corey, what's the temperature that it takes to kill the prion? Do you know that?
Over 1,200 degrees.
Yeah, 1,200 degrees. So that's a pretty hot wildfire even. So I'm curious to see what the results of that research are. Like in the Great Plains, I'm not sure that a grass fire will get quite that hot. Now, a forest fire potentially could. So the prion enters the animal orally and is ingested into the stomach. It travels into the lymphatic system from the digestive system. And then the prion enters the cells in the brainstem and the spinal cord. And then the prion begins to transform the normal prions into itself, starts making copies, unfolded copies of itself that then cause the disease. So some of the symptoms of it, and may take, like I said, 12 to 18 months for these to be exhibited by the animals. So in that time frame, it could be contaminating other animals before it even starts to show symptoms. And obviously it's the drastic weight loss or wasting, lowered head, droopy ears, drooling, ribs are showing, increased thirst, which there's a couple other diseases in deer that cause that as well, a stumbling gait, or they walk in circles, listlessness, and other neurological symptoms. So they just don't act right. You can tell right away that something's real wrong with them. Let's see if we can get this to work. Yeah, there we go. So here's an elk in this is a game farm animal, of course. And obviously you can tell there's something seriously wrong with that animal. Here's a moose in the wild. I got this picture actually from Maine. And this is a deer that was in the wild. And you can obviously tell that there's something wrong with that animal too. So this is, see if we can get this to work, Corey. Hold on, sorry. See if we can get this video to work. So I don't know, can anybody hear the voice, or is it just my mind? So you can tell by the way that deer's acting that it's definitely wrong. It's got the, the tremors, super thin.
Can't hear the voice.
You couldn't hear. I figured you guys couldn't hear that. All the guy was saying that he was out hunting and came up on a CWD deer. But so a quick history, not a quick history. It's kind of a complicated history, but history of CWD, it is not known how or where it actually began. It was first found in research mule deer herds in Colorado. So Colorado's ground zero for where this stuff started. It was confirmed as a TSE in 1978, the encephalopathy disease. And by the 1970s, late 70s, CWD was in many captive deer herds in Colorado. And then in 79, it was found in Wyoming, in the wild, in mule deer and black-tailed deer, and in game farms in Wyoming, and then in wild elk. And then in 81, it was found in Colorado in wild elk, mule deer in 85, in the wild in Colorado and Wyoming again. And then by the mid-90s, it had spread into Canada, both through through captive herds, and then the wild populations were contaminated. Then in 2000, it moved to Oklahoma and Nebraska, wild deer and elk and moose in Saskatchewan by 2000. There was one outbreak of it in South Korea, but it was from imported elk out of Canada, and the South Korean government acted immediately and had those animals destroyed. So they contained it there. There's been no examples since. Then, of course, it spread through a lot of the Great Plains states through the 2000s. Showed up in New York in 2005, West Virginia. And then by 2014, 2015, it was pretty much spread through the center of the United States to the East Coast, still in Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Arkansas, and then in Texas, because they're not technically game farms, but they're allowed to put tall fences in and kind of contain the animals down there. Michigan was confirmed, which I'll show you on the map that's coming up. Where it's at is a little bit strange in Michigan. And then in 2016, the first case was detected in Norway in a wild reindeer herd. And then in 2017, it showed up here in Montana. 2018, it was in moose in Finland, moose in Norway, deer in Quebec, and then deer in Tennessee. And then I know that last year, 2019, in Montana, it was found in a moose up in the northwest corner of the state by Canada, the northern tier of Montana against the Canadian border, like the center of the state. And I'm certain, I know there's a positive in the middle of Montana too. So, and either it's spread there and it hasn't been detected, or someone hauled a carcass from another part of the state, threw the carcass out, and spread the disease that way. So it is currently in North America, including Canada and the United States. I could find no examples of it yet in Mexico, but I don't know what sort of project work they're doing down there, or in South America. And it's spread to Europe, obviously, to Norway and Finland. And of course, in Europe, as most folks know, reindeer herds are a major part of the Scandinavian culture, and a major source of income for them. And Norway reacted by, they killed the entire herd. I can't pronounce the place where it was at, but it was like 10,000 animals, and to try to contain it. And that was just last year, so they don't have data yet for what has happened there. And then it's turned up in wild moose and in moose farms in Scandinavia. So here's the 2020 CWD spread off of USGS in conjunction with the Center for Disease Control. You can see on the bottom right the key for this. The yellows are captive facilities that are closed now, and then the red is, active, positive deer or game farms of some kind. And then the other stuff is CWD and free range populations. And then prior to 2000 in free range populations. You can see it kind of started in that, that central part of Colorado. But if you look at, Michigan there, it's in the center of the state. Well, it didn't, either someone hauled something there, or it's connected, it had to have spread there somehow. All those little outliers, the one clear down in Texas even, we all know there's some kind of corridor, and it probably hasn't been detected because the testing hasn't been done. So this is the situation in Scandinavia. The red, there's that place that I probably can't say right, Nordfelia. On the left in Norway, that's where they attempted to kill all the reindeer in that region. The green stars are moose positives. And then the map on the right, the image on the right, the little town of Kumo, which I put the red circle around, is where it's found in wild moose. And again, if it's there and it's all the way across Sweden to Norway, I mean, odds are it's probably everywhere there now too. They just don't know it yet because they haven't sampled. And of course, this is important for several reasons for them, and I think for us as native folks. They're both native Samis and Inuit people that live in that part of the world that, are related to the Inuits in North America, and they rely heavily on those reindeer herds. Second, how did it get there? There's no record of animal sales or movement between North America and Scandinavia. So how did it get there? And third, the strain has been determined to be different than the North American strain. So the European Union in 2018 actually founded a health organization that's looking into the transmissibility of this strain from animals into the human population. So to date, there has been no proven CWD infection in a person. Now, of course, that's different strain in Europe. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. There are some studies out there where they exposed other primates to CWD contaminated meats, and the primates contracted the disease. But then there's also some other agencies that replicated that research, and they couldn't get it to spread to the monkeys. So it's still up in the air, but I think it's still pretty dangerous for us. And then, of course, the World Health Organization, they want all prion diseases. We need to keep all of them from entering the human food chain. You know, that's why the strong reaction with mad cow disease, for example, and the limitations on cattle out of Canada, and even dog food and things out of Canada is restricted. So some precautions. So if CWD can spread to people, it will likely be through consumption of some type of an infected animal. You could also get it if you're potentially cleaning an animal, you know, and get into the brain or the spinal column fluids, and you get that into your system. There's a lot of research on these prion diseases going on, especially in groups of people who may be at a higher risk of contracting it because they simply interact with wild, you know, cervids, whether you're hunters or maybe working at a game farm, folks that work in wild game processing facilities, that sort of thing. And in 2006 and 2007, the Center for Disease Control did a survey of residents of the United States, and 20%, I'd like to know where they surveyed, but 20% said that they had hunted deer or elk, and more than 2/3 of the people said that they had eaten deer or elk. And of course, in native peoples, it's a lot higher exposure potential because of the use. Natives use much more of the animal than the general population does. And this picture is, those are brain tanned hides, for example. You know, I think pretty much all of us know that's the traditional way of tanning a hide, and that's literally where the disease is at. The native population tends to eat a higher percentage of wild and gathered foods than the rest of the United States does. And just other uses, from dance outfits to, you know, traditional practices, cultural practices, expose us all to it at a higher rate than the rest of the population. Corey, what is this bread called again? I forgot.
Peaky bread.
Peaky bread, right? How do you spell it?
P-I-K-I.
Okay, yeah, so I had never heard of this stuff. That's peaky bread on the right, which is it's a southwestern food, right, Corey?
Yes.
So it's a bread that's actually made with the brain itself is mixed into that flour to make that bread.
Yes.
That's one of the ingredients, yeah. So just another example of native peoples using animals differently than the general population. So for hunters, you got to consider a lot of factors when you're whether to eat meat where infected cervids live at. You know, what is the level of risk you're willing to accept for you, your family? And if you have deer commercially processed, things you need to think about are asking them to keep your animals separate instead of mixing meat, which I know is super common, especially when they grind burger. They basically just weigh how much you brought in. They grind it all en masse, and you get an equal weight back. So that's really common in wild game processing facilities. And then in areas where chronic wasting disease is known to be present, there's a lot of government agencies that recommend hunters strongly consider having the meat tested before you eat it. I haven't done this yet, but so I don't know what the costs are, but I'm probably going to start because CWD is actually here where I live now, and so it's a concern for us. We consume a lot of wild game. And I'm going to have to look into that this hunting season for us. And then if your animal tests positive for chronic wasting disease, do not eat it. And dispose of it properly, which you can contact your local agencies, and they pretty much all have ways that you can get rid of this stuff, rid of the meat, the bones, and all that. And I think most of it needs incinerated or something like that. And I think that, well, they should be able to help out, whether it's Fish and Game or, you know, Tribal Fish and Game, State Fish and Game, Fish and Wildlife Service, APHIS. All those agencies are in this game. So here's some steps that hunters can take when you're hunting in areas with chronic wasting disease. Do not shoot, handle, or eat meat from a deer, elk, or any other cervid that looks sick, acts sick, you know, acting strangely, or found dead. And this one, I was telling Corey when I was putting this presentation together, many times I have come across in the past elk that had died for some other reason, natural causes or something, and I took the ivories out of them. And now I'm gonna have to rethink that. You know, I'm gonna have to be a little more cautious with that, because I mean, everybody knows we take the ivories out and use them for all kinds of things. So also wear latex or rubber gloves when you're dressing your animal, or handling the meat. Minimize the handling of brain and spinal tissues. Like I never cut the bones on the animals I harvest. We bone out everything, always have. But minimize the handling of the brain and spinal tissues. Wash your tools thoroughly, warm soapy water, and then bleach your tools out with 1 part bleach to 10 parts water to kill the stuff. And then, like I just said, bone out your carcasses. And excuse me. Avoid the brain, spinal cords, eyes, spleen, lymph nodes, and other inedibles. Dispose of them in an appropriate location. So hunting concerns continued. Skulls and antlers should be cleaned of all brain matter prior to transportation. And if you're like, I mean, I don't keep the antlers off every animal, but if you do keep them, you know, you're messing with the brain right away. So you got to be very cautious if you're in a known CWD area in handling those skulls. Do not travel. It's my bad English slipping out. Do not take unprocessed carcasses or heads from the deer, elk, or moose into uninfected areas. And like I was saying in that map of the United States, where there's suddenly a concentration of CWD, like in New York, either there's not enough testing, or someone, you know, drew a tag in Wyoming that was from New York, drove all the way out there, shot a deer or an elk, took it home, and then threw the bones and head out where they live in New York, and boom, they had CWD. Do not use household knives or other kitchen utensils for field dressing. And in almost all the wildlife agencies now and government agencies that deal with wildlife have public health guidance for CWD and information about getting testing available, or getting testing for the meat before you consume it. And if you look on the right, you can see that's just a quick diagram of a deer where all those potentially contaminated parts of the deer are at. You know, the spleen is something you can get into pretty easily when you're field dressing. So testing. So currently for definitive diagnosis, as in a research project, it's based on immunohistochemistry testing of the obex area of the brainstem, or the medial, okay, Corey, here we go, retropharyngeal lymph nodes, there we go.
You got it.
And then abnormal prion proteins can be detected through a number of testing methods. These are some of them: IHC, the one we just talked about, Western blot, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays, prion misfolding, amplification, and real-time quaking-induced conversion. I'm not familiar with that one yet. And approved diagnostic assays for research are the IHS and ELISA testing types. And like it says, official CW tests are performed only at APHIS-approved university, state, or federal veterinary diagnostic laboratories. And they require what is it, Corey? Not certified, it's a certified veterinarian. Is that what it's called? It's a term like that.
Veterinary medical officer.
Yeah. So it has to be someone that's like basically trained how to handle this stuff, I think, so they don't contaminate the crews and themselves. And if you're doing like straight up research project. You're capturing animals. But for the general hunters like me out there in the world, there are several approved laboratories that provide and have the capacity to test for individual hunters. That if you want to get your meat tested, or you can contact your local agencies and they'll hook you up with those folks. So future concerns that I thought about while I was doing this: one, my family's got a history of raising buffalo for a very long time, and so chronic wasting disease in bison. In a 10-year study, researchers exposed chronic wasting disease to cattle day in and day out in a contained facility, and none of the bovines contracted CWD. Obviously, buffalo is a bovine, and so hopefully, and they do have a little better immune system than cattle do, so hopefully they'll be okay with CWD. Now, the other bad part of this is mad cow disease, which is also a prion disease like we talked about earlier. It originated in the United Kingdom in a zoo in the 1980s, and all that list of animals were in that zoo, including North American bison, and they all contracted mad cow disease prion impacts. So even though we don't run into that in the wild like we do CWD, mad cow disease is on the frontier as well, and luckily the USDA is much more strict about controlling it and keeping it reined in. So just something to keep in mind. If you see something strange in a cow field, got a cow acting weird, it looks just like those deer that we looked at in that video. And with that, I'm all done. So if anybody has any questions, it's pretty informal. If you have questions, want to discuss stuff, Corey's the pro at this. She's actually done CWD testing in the field. I have not. So she can answer more of those kind of questions better than I can. If anybody has anything they want to share, have at us right now.
Mitzi, do you have anything?
No, no questions. Just to add to your little chronological history list there, Mississippi became the 25th state to enter or to confirm CWD in February of 2018. So just a little tidbit there.
That was Mississippi wasn't on that list, Mitzi?
I didn't see it, but I might have skipped over it.
Yeah, I just grabbed that from the CDC site. But yeah, like Corey and I are talking, I think there's other places that weren't on the CDC's website either. Like, I can't believe it's not in Washington, for example. It's got to be.
Anybody else?
I guess I have some questions for everybody if you want to give us feedback. I was thinking about, Corey and I were talking about doing this again in the spring maybe, and looking a little more at not so much the hunting side of it, but more of the like sampling for it in the field part, if you guys are interested in that, if anybody has any feedback on that idea.
John, we've got a program here that we try to get it voluntary, but it seems that until it's in your own backyard, it doesn't seem to be a concern to anybody. Even as close as we've got it, the voluntary sampling of animals that are brought in from hunting is pretty low.
The way we remedied that way back when, I don't want to say how old I am. A lot of tribes actually offered special hunts, kind of putting them in a jackpot phase to where if they brought in their samples during their hunting season, then they were eligible to be put in that pot, with one winner drawn later on. I mean, that's just something that you can think about, because it's got to go through what tribal council or
most of our tribal hunts are free, and they're limited to males year round, but I mean there's a certain point to where we don't shoot females for reproductive reasons, but The only tagged hunts that we have here are for moose and for bighorn sheep.
Oh, well, see, that would be something to think about.
The restrictions we have on the bighorn sheep are a one in lifetime. But the moose, you can get tags for every year, even though we're restricted to bulls only now.
See.
Yeah, I don't know if you could sell. I mean, of course, I'm from Flathead, where Shannon's at, and the hunting rights are pretty wide open. Really, the treaty's pretty open there. The special sheep hunt, I don't know. You might like get their name put in twice or something's all I can think of, Shannon. But I don't know if council ever approved that.
Yeah. It's pretty hard. I've been trying to get, especially in the northwest corner of the reservation. We're pretty close to that Libby area, where they've got positive tests. We do have migratory elk herds that go from our reservation all the way to Eureka, which is right up next door to Libby. So I've been trying to get the people that hunt on the west side to bring in more samples, and it just doesn't seem to work.
Right. That's my family too, so they're pretty resistant.
Yeah.
Yeah, Choctaw's in the same boat. We don't have a check-in process. They can hunt throughout the year. In fact, they can hunt quite a number of deer through the year. We only limit to like 3 bucks and then multiple does. I mean, but in Mississippi, we're so overwhelmed with deer anyway that the restrictions aren't necessarily there. But as far as getting hunters to voluntarily provide those samples, we try to make it available, and then us being short staffed, we can't be everywhere at once. So, yeah, that we're in the same boat.
Yeah, so I wonder if it's more the just informing the hunt. I mean, I know the folks you're talking about, Shannon. There's a lot of people hunt the yak up there, anyways. Where that moose was from.
Since we've been allowed kind of back into that Yellowstone hunt with the bison, a lot of the families have kind of switched over to that rather than deer and elk. So, our elk numbers are phenomenal here. In fact, we've got ranchers begging people to come out and hunt. But, it's kind of a culture shift again back to the bison rather than the deer and elk.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that big of a shift.
Yeah, it's quite the shift. And I mean, you used to see people go out looking for that elk, and they still hunt deer on a regular basis, but the elk and moose numbers, have kind of dropped back.
Yeah, I don't know what incentives are a little tough. I mean, obviously we know what we're talking about. Tribal folks don't like to share a lot, even with each other. So especially good hunting spots and things like that. But I'll have to think about that incentives. And Corey probably has she's already done this. She has a far better feel for that sort of thing than I do. Plus, I'm used to Flathead not having many restrictions, whereas like Mitzi was saying, you got restrictions on how many deer and stuff. Everybody's different across the country, so
it's pretty open here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of unlimited on most game animals except for the moose and the buffalo, but deer and elk, there's no limit on it. It's just the limit on time a year for females.
I have a question. This is Wacy.
Okay.
Like you said before, like the prions, do they stay in like you said in the roots and leaves? Does it stay in the water as well, like in ponds or anything too? If one was infected and drink out of that.
They were doing studies on that the last I heard, and that was in 2011, because they were discussing the fact of if an animal that's already exhibiting signs were to die in the middle of a pond or stream.
Okay.
I don't know yet right now. Are you guys still doing your testing? Down there?
Yeah, we do the tribal one, the tribal deer. We do some samplings and they send them off. But
And you
the-
guys have still been clear of it?
yeah, so far I haven't heard anything, no
Okay.
CP. But for the state, I know it's like kind of like south of us, like the Cloudcroft area, or
Yeah, Unit 34.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's actually spreading out of Unit 34 too.
yeah, okay,
Also, to just let you guys know, there was CWD monies for tribes, and we didn't have a whole lot of tribes that actually went for those monies to do their testing tribal level. So that's just something to think about. And I think, when was that, Sean or Mitzi, that CWD deadline was?
It was a little bit ridiculous. It was due in August, but I don't think we got the notice till like the 15th of July or something.
Yeah.
Remember? We only had like a 2.5 week period. And I think Shannon, didn't you? You guys applied for it, I think, didn't you? And I think Thomas Tenbear is over here at Crow. I think he applied for it too for his program. But they were rushing to get it done in time.
What are you asking about, Sean? I had to step out.
That the APHIS had some chronic wasting disease money that had been.
Oh yeah, we were in the process of applying for it, but Whisper couldn't get her credentials in time, so that process kind of went out the window.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's what happened to us too, huh, Corey? They couldn't get the credentials. The same thing, same problem. I almost feel like that was a sabotage. Really, it was such a fast turnaround.
Yeah,
and then that money got diverted to game farm programs instead of going out to the tribes like it was supposed to.
Oh wow.
I wonder if I don't know if Thomas Timber's got his in time, and I wonder if anybody got any. Oh, that's really gonna annoy me if no one got it.
Anything?
Well, I guess,
anybody else?
Yeah. Also, I'm sorry. What's Mr. Cochise's first name?
Wasey.
No, Wasey.
Wasey. Sorry, Wasey. I was just looking at the water stuff right now. I hopped on the web real quick. And
okay.
It looks like it doesn't have ponds though. I was looking for ponds. It mostly talks about running water is what they've looked at.
Okay.
But it looks like it's pretty. It looks like it stays in water for quite a while. So if it's in a pond like you're saying, like say on the Great Plains where the prairie potholes are, it might contaminate those ponds and be there for years.
Dang. Okay.
I don't know I'll have to look at that. Maybe I'll look into that a little bit and send an email out through Corey, and I can send an email out to all you guys if you're interested in, and see what I can find on that. If there's any good research or, does it float? I don't know. Does it settle to the bottom? What do they do? How much do they weigh?
Yeah, that'll be pretty interesting to know.
Yeah, I don't know what it does in the water. If they're tiny, so I'd assume they get stirred up real easy. The wind blows and it probably mixes them back into the water column, or I don't know. Do they end up with little creatures in the pond? Geez, I don't know. I'll look into that though.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Well, you see, is Jennifer still down there, Jennifer Smith?
She's retired now. She doesn't work with the BIA anymore.
Oh, I see.
So yeah.
You see her
That's
around.
kind of sad. All of our friends are retiring, huh, Corey?
I know.
It says a lot about us.
I know. Anybody else have questions?
Not a question, but I'm kind of just wondering if, like, since some of the prions can stay within, like the plant and like the plant systems, I was wondering if it could like eventually be in part of the seed heads and then kind of get like spread
through the seed.
Dispersed, yeah.
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 I mean, I don't know if there's any research on it, but I mean that's something that would be interesting to find out.
Find out, yes.
Yeah, I think we should have a follow-up on this one, I think, Corey. This stuff is like Ashley just said, there's things we should follow up on these other transmission routes, like are in the water, the ponds and stuff. That's how do you deal with that? So I don't know. A pond would be really tough. You could bleach it, but you're gonna kill everything, and it have to be a little pond or a lot of bleach. Nobody wants to do either one of those. So yeah, I'm really interested in the wildfire stuff. I'm gonna look more into that, and I'll get that info out if we find anything burning up the plants and if it kills the stuff. 1200 is pretty hot. I mean, that's a pretty hot forest fire too. 1200
Yeah.
degrees.
Well, the way the forests have been burning, it could very well get up to 1200 degrees.
Yeah. Well, a lot of these fires now, they sterilize the ground. They're so hot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we'll follow up on that kind of stuff, and then feel free. I guess for one, everybody, thanks for attending and taking the time out to listen to us and make our connections as we get spun back up. I mean, Corey, Ashley, and I are all new with the service, basically, or the society, basically. And you know, just if you have any questions or want to reach out, got questions for this and that. Ashley's fantastic at environmental education and outreach. She's a great resource. You know, Corey has a lot of experience with the society already, and you know, I can make nice PowerPoints. That's about it. But if you need any assistance or project reviews or avenues to like the hoof rot stuff out there, Richard, you know, I'm pretty interested in that. That's one of the things I want to look into before the year is over. Anything you got going on, and not just animal stuff, fish stuff too. You know, I'm a fish guy. I'm actually a fisheries biologist. So aquatic things, invasive aquatics, invasive, well, the coast has a bunch of bad stuff going on, mitten crabs and all kinds of things. Abalone populations are crashing, which that one is a big one for everybody too, culturally in particular. Abalone shells are used by almost everybody I know of across the country. But any of those things, feel free to give us a holler or send an email. Spread the word around and let them know we're out here again, and really appreciate everybody's time. So go ahead, Corey, you're in charge.
Okay, well, like Sean said, we are done for this training. If you have any other people in your departments or anything, go ahead and send that CWD and registration off for them, because we will be doing it the same presentation the rest of the week. So if anybody missed it, then they can come back again.
And then the other ones we have coming up, the next one Corey is doing is on the rabbit hemorrhagic disease that's new from Europe, right? Is that where it came from?
Yeah.
And then feral hogs.
Invasive species stuff.
Basic plant stuff, yeah. And then are we doing an aquatic one? I don't think so, huh?
I don't think so, not this round.
Not in 2020. Okay. Yeah, the invasive plant stuff is controlling weeds and things. I've been doing that for years on the refuge system, so I'll probably do that one. But yeah, if you guys just feel free to contact us with anything.
If you have any other questions or right now, or like Sean said, just send them to us if you would rather just talk to us one-on-one.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a nice day.